Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Commander Clash podcast, where we talk all things Commander. And this week, we are doing Commander Shark Tank. We're going to bring you the latest innovation from the startup world of Commander. And we're going to pitch ourselves, the Sharks, and also you, the audience, to invest in our awesome ideas. Join with me today is Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Always one of my favorite podcast themes, so I'm ready for some Shark Taking.
All right, Phil Brewer's Kitchen begged us to come on when he heard we were doing Shark Tank.
Yeah, I love
some of that
pitching
investor
cards.
money.
And I love seeing what you guys bring to the table here. Such a cool theme.
And Krim, the Asian Avenger, also known as Timo, apparently. What's up?
I don't know what you're talking about. This is a nondescript green hat. And I am excited to be here. I've got some hidden gems that I've been excited to talk about just because I don't think they get enough love and hopefully see more playing Commander.
All right. And I am the Codfather, Richard. And I love Shark Tank episodes. Even though I never watch Shark Tank, all I see are just random YouTube shorts. So I'm just going to make up what I believe to be Shark Tank, okay? So you guys have to bear with me, okay? It may not match the reality of Shark Tank, but we're just going to roll with it, okay? Today's show is brought to you by Ultimate Guard, premium protection for your trading cards. You can get all the gaming accessories we use, such as playmats, sleeves, and deck boxes on Commander Clash from ultimateguard.com. And also Card Conduit, the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. Card Conduit lets you skip all the typing, time, and work associated with buy listing. Their curated service lets you send in as many cards as you want with buy list value of $1 or more, and you pay just a 5% service fee. You can use their sorted service where you list and sort your cards, and you pay only 2%. You get a detailed report and fast payment once your order is processed. You can get 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. So thank you to our sponsors, and it's time for the Ultimate Guard comment of the week. So last week we talked about commonly misplayed cards, and I wasn't here for that episode, and this comment makes no sense to me. So you guys are gonna have to give me some context, okay? Prudy Baby 5191. Vatiga is my favorite X-Men character. Hope he makes it into the Marvel MTG set. One can only assume this is Seth. Were you guys talking about Vegeta or something? Like, what the heck is Vatiga? And why is he an X-Man in the Marvel MTG
I
set?
think everything's an X-Men.
Yeah, so
I love that Richard knew who we were talking about immediately.
so Vatiga, apparently it's a Pokemon or something.
No, it's
No.
Dragon Ball.
Dragon Ball. It's Dragon Ball.
Dragon
Okay, yeah.
Ball.
That was a big comment from last week. The top comment from the week before had to do with Vatiga. I thought it was an X-Man.
Vegeta.
Apparently, yeah, Vegeta. But apparently it's none of the things I thought it was. And it's Dragon Ball Z, but I didn't know that. So, yeah.
Maybe if you dig deep enough in some alternate timeline universe reboot thing, there is an X-Man called Vatiga. You never
It's
know.
possible. Maybe I was right all along.
Yeah, sure. Why not?
All right, let us jump in to Commander Shark Tank. So we are each going to pitch two ideas, one at a time, and then the rest of us, the other three, will be the sharks ready to invest. And then also at home in the comments, you can let us know who you'd like to invest in. So I will kick things off, and I've requested a special access from our AV guy Seth here to share my screen because I'm very excited to bring you guys something. Now, in the audience, I know, Sharks, there are some Grixis enjoyers, okay? There are some Grixis enjoyers in our audience, and I have a special treat for you today. I'm going to give you guys the best technology you've ever seen in Grixis that was dug up by our archaeologists because it comes from Commander 2013. It is 11 years old, and it isn't until today that we have the knowledge to fully utilize Surveyor's scope. It is so low-key, it's like a 50-cent card, okay? Affordable by everyone, especially Grixis players, because they got to fill their decks with like mana drains and things like that. So what does Surveyor Scope do? 2 mana, artifact. You tap it, exile Surveyor Scope, search your library for X basic land cards, where X is the number of players who control at least 2 more lands than you. Put those cards onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. That's like open the way, Seth. That's open the way right there. And I'm going to show to you why that's open the way. So if this all works out, right? If everyone has 2 or more lands than you get to ramp 3 lands, right? That's open the way X equals 3. Okay, that's disgusting. So let's talk about how we make this happen and why this happens more likely than you think. The perfect Surveyor scope, okay, where you do absolutely nothing. You pay 2 mana, it gets you 3 lands. That's a -1 mana investment. Okay, it's like paying you back. It's like an infinite mana printing machine. It's so strong it has to exile itself on resolution. Okay, now obviously this is Magical Christmas Land, right? How can this happen, right? This is the one we don't need to talk about too much, but it does happen naturally if you play with like Phil in the pod and like all your opponents ramp ahead. It happens when everyone just plays lands and you play a Lotus Field. Now, Lotus Field is a land that makes you sack 2 lands, but it adds 3. So you will go down a land, and then if you're last in turn order, you'll be down 2 lands. So Surveyor Scope just works. And that happens 10% of the time. So if you play Lotus Field in your deck, by turn 3, according to the hypergeometric calculator, that's 10%. And then obviously late game, if you have green and white in your pod, they're ramping to the moon, right? This thing will just snap off for free late game. But that's not the exciting part. Like everyone knows if this works like this is insane, right? Let me show you what happens in the not so perfect scenario. Oh, by the way, so if you skip 0 land scope, this is what it looks like, right? 0 mana, add 1 mana of any color, ramp 3 basics, right? The most broken card you've ever seen in your life, right? Like. No. Let's talk about skip 1 land scope. Now this is very complicated, Sharks. I got a big table for you here to math out exactly what it will go on. Okay, so on the left here, we're gonna have the general opponents, the table, taking their turns 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right. So every turn they draw a card, they play a land. Okay, that's very simple, right? So on turn 1, you have 1 land. On turn 2, you have 2 lands. On turn 3, you have 3 lands. On turn 4, you have 4 lands. You add up all that mana, that's 10 mana. Okay? And then every turn, you draw a card, you play a card. So you have 7 cards in hand. Okay, perfect. Now let's talk about you, the intelligent Surveyor Scope player. So on turn 1, you play 1 land, you pass the turn. On turn 2, you use 2 mana to play Surveyor Scope. Okay, so you use 2 of that up. You're down a card. You go down to 6 cards in hand. Turn 3, you skip the land drop. You just simply skip it. Okay, you just skip the land drop. So you still have only access to 2 mana plus the 1 on turn 1. You have 3 cumulative mana. You're now 3 mana behind the normal player, but you have an extra card in hand. You're back up to 7 because you didn't play the land. Okay, turn 4 rolls around. You know, your opponent's on 4 lands, you're still on 2 lands. You snap off the Surveyor Scope. You jump all the way up to 6, right? Now you have 9 total mana and you have 7 cards in hand. Now let's compare the 2 outcomes, Sharks. Your opponents have 4 lands, you have 6, right? You've gone up 2 lands on them. Your opponents had 10 mana, you have 9. So you used 1 mana to do all of this. Right? And then your opponents have 7 cards, you have 7 cards. What does this mean? Right? This is a 1 mana, ramp 2 lands, draw 1 card, basically cycle itself. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that the greatest card you've ever seen? Now you're like, oh, how does this happen? Right? So you skip the lands, right? But so to only skip 1 land, you play a bounce land, right? So that will get you 2 lands behind. If you have 3 bounce lands in your deck, 27.6% chance you're going to have it. And then if you only have 2, 19.3. And then add the 10% from Lotus Field, which you talked in the last slide, you're at 37.6% chance of this happening. 1 mana, ramp 2, draw 1 card. If this was printed as a spoiler, we'd all be going nuts right now. Okay, but that's not the most scuffed scenario, right? The most scuffed scenario is you gotta skip 2 lands, right? You gotta skip 2 lands to make this happen. You didn't get the bounce land, no one ramped. So what happens? Okay. Same thing. Turn 2, you're at 1 mana, 1 cumulative mana, because you use 2 mana to cast Surveyor Scope. Turn 3, you skip a land drop. Turn 4, you skip another land drop, right? So at this point, you have 5 total mana over all your turns. Your opponents have 10 mana. You're down 5 mana, okay? But you're up 1 card. You're at 8 cards. You're discarding the hand size, by the way. So you need to use this like loose mana that's sitting around. Otherwise, you're going to discard the hand size. And then by the time turn 5 rolls around, you snap off Surveyor Scope. You go to 11 mana. Your opponents are at 5 mana. But you're at 8 cards. They're at 7. You're at 6 lands. They're at 5. What does this mean? It's a 4 mana, ramp 1 land, draw 2 cards. That's not that bad. That's not a terrible, if this is the most scuffed scenario. So the most scuffed scenario is you get opposition agented, okay? That's the most scuffed scenario, right? But assuming like something crazy doesn't happen, if you're just making land drops, the worst case is 4 mana, rampant growth, draw 2 cards. I present to you the greatest ramp spell of all time. You play it in every single deck that is not white or green. Because white and green, you don't need to do this, right? White and green, you can just troll ramp your way through this. But all of these individual cards are so broken. And the skip 0 and skip 1 are like ridiculously broken. Skip 2, like, okay. Like, it's not like anything crazy. You're not going to write home about it. The only caveats are the draw cards or draw lands, right? Because you're saving land drops. And then you need to use your leftover mana somehow efficiently, right? It's a lot harder to use like 2 mana here, 2 mana here, 3 mana there versus like 4, 5, 6 mana. But Sharks, I'm so confident you're going to like it. I've already MTG financed like 8,000 Surveyor Scopes, so I could give you guys access to all the Surveyor Scope that you want.
I will say that is maybe the most impressive presentation I've seen on Commander Shark Tank. You went super in depth with the math and the breakdown. My question for you though, Richard, is there any concern about scalability? Like what happens if this theory catches on and someone else at the table is also trying to Surveyor Scope, or 2 other people? Doesn't the whole thing fall apart if this becomes a popular strategy? Because then other people are also going to be skipping their land drops and then everything just like falls apart.
Yes, but like we're not there, right? So
Okay.
so you guys still play. You guys play so many bounce lands, right? Like, and I'm always so proud of you guys that you play bounce lands. So if someone plays a bounce land, it's like skipping a land drop for the strategy, right? So far, it hasn't broken. And also remember that I just gave you 3 examples, but the whole spectrum applies, right? Like 2 people can ramp, 1 person cannot ramp, and it would still turn on like your Surveyor Scope partially. Right.
I think
it also doesn't work if you play with people that play 31 lands, because they're going to play 2 lands and proceed to miss land drops the rest of the game. Okay. But if you play people that like believe in casting spells and making mana, like this is fine, right? This is perfect. This is actually exceptional, right? But disclaimer, 31 land enjoyers and mana dorks and stuff like that, then you might get a little wrecked. And then you just chuck this to Faithless Looting or something. Right?
I think what has me sold is, if you really think about it, and this is a much simpler explanation, but if this is 2 mana, ramp a single land, that's still a really good card, right? People play Rampant Growth, people play all those kind of cards. So even if you come nowhere near the ceiling of the card, where the ceiling is like, it really is like open the way, busted, probably win the game good. But even if you're like close to the floor, where you got to do a little work and you end up wrapping 1 land or 2 lands, that still seems like it's worth it. So I think I'm investing in Surveyor Scope. I think I'm on board, assuming I'm not playing white or green. If I'm playing a Crim color deck, then I think I'm on board.
Yeah, I'm thinking about. So I have a Grixis artifact deck that can even
It's even an
create
artifact for
token
synergies.
copies of this. Yeah, it is even an artifact. There's multiple problems though. First of all, one of my playrooms, they all miss their land drops. I don't know if they listen to this podcast. Man, do they cut lands for spells if they get new cards. So they might, if they miss land drops, which they will, this thing gets worse. But even for 2 mana, get 1 land, that seems good enough.
If
I
your
only
whole
played
play group is
4
stuck on
basics
3
in the
lands,
decks.
you can afford starting with the 6-card hand, right? Like if they're gonna be super scuffed, you can be a little scuffed, right? Like it's not gonna matter too much.
Yeah. So how many basics do you play? If this is, I do have another basic fetch. I play the Mycosynth Wellspring, I think. Yeah, that gets basic. Maybe I
So
switch
you
out
need to run at least
the
3 or 4
Wellspring.
basics for this,
That's
right? So
That's
that's the other
reasonable.
I play
downside.
4.
You got to play basics.
I have one other question.
I think I might give this a shot. Actually, that seems.
It's worked every single time. Like it works.
I
It has
know,
worked
I've
every
seen
single
it.
time on Clash. Tomer's a huge believer. We've seen it work for him too. And then it's actually the perfect Richard card because you're like, oh, I'm stuck on mana. I'm at 3 mana. Leave me alone. And then snap, you're like 8 mana the next turn, right? Like, and then you just like plow everyone over, right? Like it's actually like perfect, right? The only thing is like Krim is sitting here. And I can see he sees a Surveyor scope. He just holds up 3 mana for Oppo Agent, and your game is done, right? So if your opponents are very smart, it gets a little tricky, right? But he's not going to have Oppo Agent all the time. He's not going to have Oppo Agent all the time. He's not
no.
going to hold up the mana. He doesn't know
What if I
about
just
the secret
shatter
deck.
it?
He's like, what a terrible card, right? I'm not gonna counter this.
I got some bad news. I was going to throw it on my wants list. There are no foils of this. No special versions and no foils.
Yep.
You're
'cause no
gonna
one-
find this
no
is
one
the
played it
problem with a
until
lot of
now.
my favorite cards.
This is
Yeah,
the
we are
problem,
at
yeah.
the forefront of technology here. Wizards has not caught on and made us foil secret lair versions.
Wow.
You're gonna have to play
Is that
with
not a blessing?
the Commander 2013.
I'll throw it in my want list. I think you got me with this. That seems worth a try in Grixis.
I'm very
That's-
curious,
That's
Richard.
2 sharks. That's 2 sharks down.
I gotta ask you. I mean, look, they may have already been approving of it, but what if I'm trying to set up early and by skipping lands and waiting? Like, I don't know. If setting up early, isn't it just better to like have a mana rock or something like that?
You can play a
No.
mana rock even if you skip.
I mean, you can play a mana rock
in
and
3 mana rocks.
It's actually ideal if you play a mana rock with this setup, right? Because you can start
Yeah.
skipping land drops, play mana rock, and then snap this off.
But
But this
the
sets you up
problem
for
is-
post rotation or post
Post-rotation,
draft,
right?
right?
Okay, I'll let you know when I
Post-draft.
try this in standard. Like, I'm more so talking about like, okay, so I'm playing an early low to the ground deck, right? Let's say I'm playing like ninjas or rogues or something along those lines, right? I am now forced to skip lands on turns where I need to be holding up. I need more resources. And I need it early. I like this is a payoff if I can wait and like hold off for long enough, right? But in the early games, I want to play stuff like cheap stuff and then also hold up cheap interaction. That requires at least 4 mana. So I
you
am
can
now
hold up cheap interaction, but if let's say you play like a 2 mana commander and you want to slap it down, well, I mean you can technically here because you're at 2 lands. Let's say you're at like a 3 mana commander or something, right? I would argue it's better to Surveyor Scope, draw some cards, snap it off, Wrath, and then play your commander, start beating everyone's face down. As opposed to play your commander, you can't hold up interaction because you barely have any lands, right? Or if you do hold up the interaction, you barely have anything to progress your board with. So I would argue that even like low to the ground decks and things like that, for the same reason you play sweepers in your aggro decks, that you ramp, you sit around, you sweep the board, then you deploy your crap and then go for it.
Plus,
But
you're going to
see,
be
like-
missing land drops anyway, Krim. This is the perfect card
Yeah.
for you. It just naturally fits your play style.
we have furthered that narrative, and that is a lie. My problem is not that.
I mean, but joking aside, like, you know, we do miss land drops. Like, this does happen,
Sure.
right? This is a card that instantly catches you up. Like, the problem with
does-
missing a land drop is you can only make 1 every turn, so it's like impossible to catch up. But like in a giant burst, you can get 3 lands in Grixis, which is like impossible normally, right? So it also has that safety valve factor where you can burst catch up.
It has that safety valve where you can burst catch up, but like I guess it requires me to be behind.
Yeah, which happens
And-
some percentage of the time, right? Just naturally due to variance.
Yes. But like being behind on resource, like this feels like, why wouldn't I just play a card draw spell? Why wouldn't I just play like this, like a heuristic study or I don't know?
Because you're not
Some-
ramping, right? because you
ramping.
can untap as Grixis on turn 4 with 6 mana. That's indestructible and non-interactable. Right.
Well, I wouldn't say
in the good cases.
indestructible, but
Okay, I mean, you can get ruination, right? But you know, like,
well,
actually,
that
you can't.
gets
no,
amazing.
I'm
You can
talking
get
about
Armageddon.
like Surveyor scope specifically. I guess
I mean, that's true.
I don't know. I'm not a big fan. Like the reason why I'm not the hugest fan is because this requires me to fall behind. Right? Like in order for me to see full value of this, I am forced to fall behind.
So you're not falling behind, right? So when you miss a land drop, we're counting that mana, right? So it's the mana that
Sure.
land produces this turn, and also the
Right.
mana produces next turn. It's like
Right.
a suspend card, right? But in 2 turns, you're gonna catch all the way back up and spring shot yourself
Mm.
above your opponents, right? So the problem is if you get interacted in that time, you're screwed. Right? Like if someone disenchants the Surveyor scope, then you're in big trouble. But that's like playing a bounce land and getting strip mined, right? Like, yeah, there's some downside, there's some counterplay to it, but in general, it's pretty good.
I think that because you don't believe in the word in Commander, it doesn't apply to you, but I'm going to say it. The big capital T, I'm going to say tempo. And I do. And
Didn't Richard make a whole calculation on tempo here? And in 2 of those, you kind of get out ahead in tempo.
you
Wait,
don't
You,
though.
you will get
Fair.
ahead on turn
You-
5, right? But
Yeah,
but
like-
you know, your board on turn 3 and 4 are lacking compared to someone who played a 3 and 4 drop, right? So Krim is right. You are behind in tempo.
Yeah.
What are you tempoing exactly, right?
Because well, those turns are the turns where I assume when I've seen you play this tons of times, and I'm just always like, okay, I'm gonna just set up, and then whatever you go into, like by then I'll have all my shields up. Right. So on the turns where you finally get your payoff, I spent that time setting up critical cards on critical turns. And this way, like I put myself in a sturdy position. Usually, yeah, maybe I become arch enemy because of it. But I think that taking the turns off on key turns where I'm setting up key pieces to my engine or for me to have something to care about protecting is huge here. So like if I'm playing my fairies deck, I definitely want early stuff.
that's valid. That's the Sam Black argument, right? Like basically play no ramp, and every turn use your mana to deploy threats, right? And if you want to do that, then like all ramp is bad, right? Including this one, right? You wouldn't play rampant growth, that's a tempo loss, right? You wouldn't play explosive vegetation, that's a tempo loss. So yeah, if you don't believe in ramp whatsoever, do not play Surveyor Scope, right? But if you believe in ramp, then I think you definitely should, right? If you believe in like, what is the suspend card? The search for tomorrow or something, right? You're taking a turn off on turn 1. You could have been deploying an Esper Sentinel or something, but instead you decided to deploy a ramp spell, right? So if you think that's worth it, then Surveyor Scope is right up your alley. All
I guess.
This is a limited time offer. I need to
Yeah,
know,
sure.
Are you
I'm
in?
in.
I'll buy.
Are you out?
I'm in, yeah.
I'll
I'm
just
in.
buy it. Sure, I'll buy in. Why not? I mean, like I don't
All
believe.
right, now you guys
like,
gonna fight each other for the equity split. But we'll take that offline. We'll take that offline because we don't have time for that.
I'll buy in. Whatever. Sure. Okay.
That's the pure pressure buy-in from Krim here. I don't know if we should trust him for the rest of
Talked
the
him
money.
into it.
All right, Seth.
Ah,
All right.
All right.
Now
All right.
that you've used all your money, you got to get it back. You got to get
I
it back
got-
with your next card.
Oh, so do I have something to sell all you sharks today? So have you ever been playing a game of Commander and you cast your big card draw spell only to go to your end step and discard most of those cards? One of the things we've discussed a ton lately is the importance of Reliquary Tower. In 2024 Commander, there's so much card advantage that it's really easy to end up with this huge handful of cards, almost regardless of what archetype you're playing. I know a while ago, like last season, I made the mistake of cutting Reliquary Towers, and it was so bad. I was discarding so many cards to hand size. So I view Reliquary Tower as one of the most important cards that I put in every deck, but unfortunately, the rules of Commander make it so I can only play one Reliquary Tower. But did you know there's a mana rock that goes by the name of Thought Vessel that has the same text as Reliquary Tower. You probably know the card. It's just a 2-mana mana rock that is also Reliquary Tower. And I'm here to tell you that this card, we should think of it like Reliquary Tower. We should just put it in every single deck, because one of the biggest upsides of Reliquary Tower is its low opportunity cost, right? You're replacing a land, you already got to run like 40 of them, so it's really easy to sneak that into your deck. But the same is true of Thought Vessel, because it's a ramp spell. In your typical deck, you're going to have 10 or 15 ramp spells, so it's pretty easy to like downgrade one of your Rampant Growths or Mind Stones or Arcane Signets into a Thought Vessel. Sure, your color fixing isn't going to be quite as good, but it still ramps you, and it's going to make sure you're not discarding all your cards to hand size. Those turns where you cast your Rishkar's Expertise or whatever big card draw spell, hoping to draw into your Reliquary Tower. Well, if you have Thought Vessel in your deck, now you have 2 shots at hitting that Reliquary Tower. Plus, there's even extra upside. Sometimes you have to like make your land drop first and then cast your Rishkar's Expertise, or you draw into it in mid-turn. You can still play a Thought Vessel, even though you can't play a Reliquary Tower if you've already made your land drops. And I know what some of you are going to say. You're going to say, well, isn't it just going to get blown up? Sure, that, Farewell or Onto Inversion, it could happen. It could blow up your Thought Vessel, but I think we overrate the chances of that. Plus, I don't think it really matters, because if you have that big card draw spell, all you really need is that 1 turn or 2 turns where you don't have to discard to hand size, so you can actually deploy all those cards that you drew off of your Rishkar's Expertise or whatever. So I'm going to tell you, I think the floor on Thought Vessel is super high, because it's a 2-mana mana rock. It's like a Mind Stone essentially, and the ceiling is super higher, where this could essentially be drawing you 5 cards, 10 cards by not making you discard them all to hand size. So I'm telling you, you should probably not just play Thought Vessel, but you should really play it in every single deck, just like a Reliquary Tower. Doesn't matter what you're doing, play it in the deck, cut another ramp spell. So that's what I present to you, Sharks. Thought Vessel in every deck.
I already
I
invested.
like this
I
card.
play it a lot. Like I yes.
Do you already
There's
play it?
another one. I mean, I played in all the decks that play mana rocks. So I checked.
See, even if you don't
it's
play
in-
mana rocks, I think you should play it.
Yeah, it is in one deck that doesn't play too many mana. I'm checking my paper decks here, and it is in my Jadar deck, which plays very limited mana rocks. I think there's an Arcane Signet is the other one. And yeah, Thought Vessel is the other one. Whenever I draw cards, I hate hand size maximums. There's another one for 3 mana that I don't play. I think
Decanter of Endless Water. Yeah, that is a 3 mana one, mana of any color, but it is 3 mana instead of 2. I really like that Thought Vessel is only 2 mana to deploy, so you can like cast that big card draw spell and maybe have the mana to like cast it in the same turn. But Krim, what about you, Krim? Are you on board? Are you investing?
I think I'm also going to talk a little about, not only am I on board with this card, but I'm also going to defend Decanter here as someone, as you know, who's trying to Cryptic Command and play Phyrexian Obliterator. All in the same turns.
But play
having the additional color, like creation of any color, I do think Decanter's very good. And I already like Thought Vessel, right? So I play that in a good amount of decks that usually have commanders that draw a lot of cards, like my Anawan or my Da Vinci deck, right? Like all these decks draw lots of cards, and I always want more Reliquary Towers. Now, I have tried Thought Vessel in non-draw decks, and it's okay. It plays out every now and then. It's a decent mana rock. I would choose it over Mind Stone. See, the problem is I've started to move away from Thought Vessel into Decanter because I like the color. But the idea is still there, right? The idea behind the pitch is still there. I support the idea, right? I do like it because you don't think much. You're like, oh, my commander doesn't draw cards, or my things usually don't draw a ton of cards. But sometimes you just have, like, you've probably been overloaded with a Psych Rift.
Yep.
In a weird way, I usually pitch Psych Rift as card advantage to my opponents because they usually get it. But this is in one of those situations where you don't have to discard all the stuff after you've been, like, rifted or anything like that. There's a lot of, I guess technically the rock would get rifted back. But the one thing is you can play it the turn, and then you could just save your cards. So I kind of like this in non draw heavy decks anyways. So I'm sold. I buy.
So now for the tough one. Phil and Crim, those are the easy ones. Richard is the biggest mana rock hater that I have ever met. But he also is one of the biggest Reliquary Tower believers that I've ever met. Can I get you to overlook your hatred of mana rocks, Richard, and replace one of your catch-up draw spells or Surveyor scopes with a Thought Vessel to keep those cards in hand?
Over my dead body, Seth, I will play a basic land before Thought Vessel. So here's the problem with Thought Vessel. If you find yourself in a situation to draw like 5 cards or something like that, right? Like you've drawn like way too many cards, you're probably behind on board, right? Which means what you need to do immediately afterwards is sweep it, right? And Farewell doesn't have the same tone. If it's Farewell, then discard 3 cards in your hand, right? Because you lost your Thought Vessel and now you got to go down to hand size, right? It's still a mana rock that blows itself up, right? So I've played Thought Vessel once in like the past 5 years, and that was the Sergeant John Benton deck. That's the commander where you draw cards equal damage, because I plan on drawing like 1 million cards every single turn. So like, okay, the Thought Vessel is worth the risk because I literally will be drawing cards every single turn, right? But there'll be plenty of games where you don't snap off that rich cards expertise. You just ramp into something and then you get Wrath and you're like, wow, now I went down like 2 cards, right? Like what was that, right? So like with all mana rocks, you need to parlay that into permanent advantage. So if you go Thought Vessel into Open the Way and you get an additional like 1 on the X, then like it's perfect, right? Like you converted that, right? But if you go Thought Vessel into like Thrag Tusk or some dirty mid-range crap that doesn't draw cards or ramp, and then you get Rat, you're super, super behind. So I view Thought Vessel like a Simian Spirit Guide. Like sometimes you need it, like sometimes you need the mana rock to do something, but you better win immediately or convert that into a long-lasting advantage before it blows up.
But I think you can convert it. I get your point that sometimes you need to wrath the board right away. So that is fair. And I know for you always play the blow up all permanent wrath. So it's probably even worse for you because you're going to be Hour of Revelationing or whatever. But I would argue that you don't need to keep it around that long for it to be worth it. Like if you have that big card draw turn, if you can just get that 1 turn to untap with all your mana and like get the cards out of your hand, I think even that, it's kind of done its job. So I don't think you need this necessarily to stick around for like the rest of the game for it to be worth its value. Because think of how many, I should have made a fancy spreadsheet with all the math on it and pulled up the hypergeometric calculator. I feel at a disadvantage here.
Hypergeometric me.
But I would say that those cards that you save, if you save 4 or 5 cards in hand that you would have discarded hand size for 1 turn, that's not bad for 2 mana. Like even that 1 turn, it kind of is 2 mana, draw you 4 cards or 5 cards if it lets you keep them in your hand for that 1 turn cycle and play them. So
what if you just play Expedition Map as a way to get your Reliquary Tower and ensure it stays on the battlefield, therefore preserving,
but this also ramps you
its usefulness
from 2 to 4. And we like ramping from 2 to 4 because then you get to your 4 mana ramp spells. But yeah, I figured you'd be a tough sell on this one. But 2 out of 3 is not bad. 2 out of 3 is not bad. I'll take it.
All right. Phil, would you like to pitch us a card?
All right. So I got a card that is also an artifact, actually. So right now we're all artifacts here. It's called Hylda's Crown of Winter. It's 3 mana. For 1 mana, tap target creature. This ability costs 1 less to activate during your turn. And then for 3 mana, you can sacrifice it and draw a card for each tapped creature your opponents control. So, first of all, very cheap. It's like 30 cents. It has 0% on EDA track, which is, it's an artifact. It's got to be very well played to see some percentage there. But it is also, it looks like archetype specific. Like it looks like you play it in a Hylda deck where you tap down stuff and then profit from it. But our editor, Neotuk, actually convinced me to play this or put this in one of my decks. And it has been doing great work because just tapping down big attackers is pretty good. And usually you don't even have to do this because you can just politic with it. Like once you have this threat of activation open, just before every attack step, while it's untapped, you say, you're going to attack me with this? No. Okay. And then you don't tap it down. And then at some point, if somebody swings in with like 5 creatures or whatever, the board has been tapped by combat, you just crack this, draw a new hand, and then you can get it back with a Sun Titan, maybe. I mean, it's still a permanent. You can do whatever with it. It triggers Simulacrum Synthesizer. I play it in my Mishra deck, where you can copy it and then crack the copy to draw cards. I mean, that's very good, but it is also good in just any deck that has the time to play it. So don't play it in aggro. I guess you can tap down an attacker, but it is a little dirty. It is a little bit of a politics tour. I like it though. It gives you a little power over the board for not too much costs, and it's Crim.
I'm so curious because I just want to let you know I played a game with Joey from EDH Rec, and then I played a game with Daniel Hulk, right? We were all in the same game. Daniel has this absurdly annoying tap deck where all it does is tap everything down, and he actually played this.
Then it's great, yeah.
And then I realized I'm not just talking about this card, but I'm talking about in general how annoying getting your stuff tapped down is, because it's perfectly in the realm of where the politicking power, the whole table will jump at the chance to help you or do something for you if you don't tap their stuff down. And everyone always thinks, oh, well, it's just tapping my thing down, so like it's not removing it. So it gives people this like illusion that they haven't lost their creature, their best creature, but they actually lost a ton of tempo. So I actually am hard buying into this card because the tap ability is so annoying. It is so you could tell who got most of their stuff tapped down. Like it was me. It is so annoying that just by my own bias, I have to buy into this. And on top of that, if it ever becomes a point where you have nothing left, or no cards left, you can then draw a ton of cards. And it's got the Tamiyo -2 ability, right? Attached to it. And you don't even have to like tap it to do it. You just pay 3 to sack. I think this card is the truth.
So
I buy.
Nice.
So I played a Hylda
Joined the
deck.
pitch right there.
I played a Hylda deck a while ago. So obviously I played Hylda's Crown of Winter in the Hylda deck. And I came away from it feeling like I should probably play this in more decks, because it turned out like the tapping mode, whatever, like it is nice and I can see the political aspects of it. But it turns out in Commander, someone is probably making a big board full of creatures and attacking with those creatures. So it's pretty easy for this to be a colorless draw 3, 4, 5, 6, even more than that. So I think it's actually like super easy for this to just be worth it as a card draw spell. I guess if you're playing in a playgroup that isn't very creature heavy or whatever, then maybe it gets worse. But I think just in a generic like playgroup or generic pod, this is worth it just as a way to like draw a whole bunch of cards, because it's colorless, especially in colors that maybe struggle with like burst card draw. But I found this to be kind of like a colorless Rishkar's expertise or something that doesn't even care about you having anything on the battlefield. So I'm on board with this one too. I kind of forgot about it, so I haven't put it in many decks recently, but I'm a buyer. I'm a buyer on Hylda's Crown of Winter.
I remember Seth playing this, and I remember it was super impressive. But that's because he was literally a tap down deck, right? Like, and it was super good. And I don't buy the first mode. The first mode is like almost everywhere in white, but no one plays the cards, right? Like a creature that you can tap to tap something down, like that exists like in a million places, but no one plays those cards. Like that mode is like a bonus. So it hinges on the 6 mana sack it. How many cards can you draw and how consistent it is? I feel it's a little sketchy, right? Like if the board is empty because it was Wrath, and then you're out of gas because your board was Wrath, you need to draw cards. You have Hylda's Crown, you're kind of sad faced, right? Like for 6 mana,
yes, yeah.
you could, like if you're in blue, you can play like an X card draw spell, right? You could draw 4 with no conditions attached that also scales with X. You can play Mind's Eye and colorless, right? Like for 6 mana, I think I don't know, it scales up a lot higher. Like you can play the One Ring. This is a tough one, but I'm very curious. So I will buy it, but I'll just buy a 5% stake Phil. I am not
Yeah,
super confident in
it's
this, but
okay.
it is intriguing enough that I want to test it out because I remember seeing it very impressive, right? And there are a lot of board states where you're like, well, if you had this thing, it's like draw 20, right? It's insane, right? But there's also a lot of board states where it does absolutely nothing, right? And that worried
Yeah.
me. As
I
one of your
gotta-
card draw spells, right? Because your card draw spells need to work, right? Because if they don't work, you're kind of screwed, right? So I'm a little worried about that one.
So in my own experience, the tapping is only good if you don't use it. Like just the threat of activation is more powerful than actually tapping it down and then it's tapped for the rest of the turn cycle. So as long as everybody respects this, it's very good. But then once you tap something down, yeah, you just tapped something down. Unless you tap down whatever, Phyrexian Obliterator or something that was going to swing in. Or like block is probably worse for this one. It's above average. Like it's better than it looks. Not to undersell it here. It's obviously not the One Ring. If you want to play the One Ring, that's probably better. But this one is
It might
surprisingly
even be better. It's 1 mana cheaper.
Yep.
Okay, you're losing me now. You're losing me a little
It
bit.
is $100 cheaper.
I'm
than
kidding,
Money
what-
going
Vina. I
back
hope
in the
you
wallet.
MTG financed it because 3 sharks have bought it to Hylda's crown. So Krim, it is your turn to sell us on the wonders. What do you have?
Oh, this is great. You know, what if I told you I could help Commander games end before, like, in the duration, like how long we took to pitch you all these cards, the game would be done before that. You know, sometimes your play group has the Saffron Olives, you know, that like to draw 100 cards. You know, oh, I'm going to just keep spinning my wheels. Watch this. Or, you know what I mean? Or you're tired of Phil getting that value, right? And you're tired of every little spirited companion and sky scanner that Richard will throw on the ground. So you're just like, well, I want to just go to combat. And I'm going to do that. And if this causes me to lose the game, then one way or the other, equity in time equity is huge. And everybody saves as long as this card is on the board. And it's Bedlam. That's right, Bedlam from Urza's Saga. 2 red enchantment, because all the other 3 love artifacts, apparently. Very simple. 1 line of text. Creatures can't block. And if you really want to rub in the salt, you can get the 7th edition one. It's in white border. That's like altogether, this card is like maybe $3, $4, under $5. You're like, but Krim, why is this good? Because there's so many times in a game where you'll be surprised how much, if you resolve this on turn 4, how much time is chopped off your commander game. There's no decision. You don't have to put the ball in your opponent's court to figure out, oh, do I want to block with Solemn? Or do I want to block with, you know, like my Spirited Companion? You know, I want to block with all my mana dorks. Doesn't matter. They don't get to block. You just remove that decision entirely. And you know what? You're like, but Krim, what if I die? Cool, next game. But the point here is, at least for the most part, if you are playing an aggro deck or an attack deck, or definitely in the, like a deck that just rewards you on attack triggers, like an Ishin, or just dealing damage to opponent, anything along those lines, I find myself I just love playing Bedlam. I don't have to politic. I don't have to worry about anything. And funny enough, as an agent of chaos, you probably also love this because, well, you know, it's like, whatever, let's play this, see what happens. So just think about how much faster games can go by here, and how much, like, your early game threats, you don't have to worry about them scaling into like, oh, well, I can't beat a 10-10 Eldrazi. Well, okay, pray that they don't swing back at you. But the point here is, you don't have to worry about bigger blockers. You don't have to worry about bigger blockers. You just go right to face. If you want to smork, if you want to go face is the place, if you truly believe that player removal is the best removal, this is it right here. And you get to do it in style, in white bordered like fashion. And again, that's right, that face that Phil makes when it's like swirling in itself because it's such a hideous border, you get to do that. You get to be a part of that. It's great.
The art is wild. I'll give you that.
The art is wild.
That is true.
Y'all don't attack enough either. I get this. So this
Here's
is
the
a problem.
problem.
Crowd. Y'all don't attack enough.
If you're an attacking deck, right, and you can't attack profitably, that means your opponent, like, each of your opponents has blockers that are bigger than your creatures. So
Or
if you
chumpers.
play the Bedlam to phase through and smack him in the face, those bigger creatures are now coming right back at your face, and you can't block. There's a green card, Concordant Crossroads, I think, that gives all creatures
All
haste.
haste.
Yep.
Super scary, right? Because you're like, wow, my deck needs to haste out creatures. Let's put it in. But then all your opponents can like haste things out too. And usually does not fare well, end well for you because it's 3 opponents with this ability, and then versus you 1 with this ability, right? So
Sure.
you have to have like life linkers or something. Like, how do you even stay alive if you're bedlaming it up? Like, Vigilance doesn't help. You can't.
Propaganda.
You are fast forwarding this game. And as you all, I could tell by your confusion, I know you all don't attack enough. Because regardless of whether the creature is better or not, there is the removal just of that whole blocker step. You just remove that. And that is going to exponentially speed up your game. One way or the other, health totals will get lower. You're worried about going long. You all are worried way too far into the future. I'm tired of ramp players and their Feel of the Deads, right? Oh, I'm going to play these 2/2s. That's it, right? Well, yeah, okay, I'm going to go right past that. So the game plan, and on top of that, this can be used. Obviously, if you're behind on board, maybe we don't deploy this one, right? We can just hold this. Use this like a crater hoof.
But you're
something,
always
right?
behind in board, right? It's
Not
3 boards
always.
versus 1.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
no, because your board, you can like, let's just say you have like a wide array of like humans or whatever, dragons, things like that, in the color of red. Whether it's Mardu humans or just mono red dragons or anything along those lines, sometimes you just need to get that attack through, and there's too many chumpers. Like there's chump blocking is such a wrench in your game plan sometimes that I just want to remove that entirely. You can't chump block. You don't get to do any of that. I'm gonna force you to wipe, and this card does things where now the blocker step is gone. This puts opponents who are afraid of your board or creatures or maybe the board in total. Like let's say the other 3 people, not including me. Let's say you, me, and like Seth have killer board, but Phil doesn't. So Phil might now be forced to use a board wipe or answer this. So I think that I like this as a way to force your opponent's hand, to force combat, and then to also speed up the game.
So I don't know if I can invest in Bedlam, but it did remind me of another card that I am interested maybe in investing in. I want your thought on it since you're big on the can't block thing, Krim. War Cadence? War Cadence is a 3 mana enchantment, and you can pay a red and X, and it says, this turn, creatures can't block unless their controller plays X for each blocking creature they control. It's kind of like a reverse Ghostly Prison. What do you think about that style of effect that you can activate on the turns when you need to, and probably just for like maybe 2 or 3 mana, because who's going to leave up enough mana to block with all their creatures, but still not get murdered by your opponent's stuff? Because that's my concern with Bedlam, is like, yes, it's nice my opponent's creatures can't block, but I kind of want to block so I can durdle around and not die. So, well, what about War Cadence?
Do you see there, Seth? Do you see the problem with that mindset? You just said you want to durdle around. There is no durdling with this.
That's why I'm not investing in it.
The thing is, I'm
You'll die
selling this
instantly.
card to a bunch of people who don't attack enough, and they don't see the vision. Right?
I think it might be the wrong audience. Yeah.
I will say that the card you had mentioned. Do you know one problem with that? The problem is, I'm gonna go to attacks. Okay. Player A is going to go to combat. Player B is going to go, I have 4 mana. I want to hold up this. I also want to see if I can connect the dots to this. Yes. And then what about other players? No, I'm going to remove that. I'm selling you time.
Players, I gotcha.
We are going to face. That's the place. That's it. That's all there is.
I think
you're gonna just come on.
I feel like this is one of those scam pitches. I don't even know if this product's real. I don't have any confidence.
I'm not trying to sell you knives. I'm not trying to sell you knives. I'm not selling you NFTs or something scammy like that. I am selling you time equity.
Is the FTC gonna come after us, Krim?
I'm out. I'm out on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I probably wouldn't even attack even if this was on the board, just out of principle. Don't give
Just
to
out of spite.
them. Maybe I want to tap them for abilities, you know?
I feel Sundering Eruption, the MDFC, it's like 3 mana,
Oh, yeah,
destroy a
that's
non-basic. non-flyers can't block this turn does everything you need here without like killing yourself, without like angering the whole table. I feel you play this and then people just kill you because they're like, well, I can't block anymore, and that's kind of scary, so I'll just remove this thing, right? And that conveniently that person can't block either, so let me just hit their face until they die. So I feel this is scary. So I feel like if you're like playing any non-red creature, you play the overrun. Like the overrun does what you want, right? Like if there's like spirited companions and things like that stopping you, you just overrun them. You play tramplers, or you do the Sundering Eruption, right? When they're not expecting it. Because if you plop this out on turn 4, I'm kind of getting scared. I'm just gonna start smacking your face. And the 3 of us have 120 life. You have 40. So it's a lot easier for us to kill you than it is for you to kill everyone else, right?
Boy, I would show you what this card does, but you all are all saved by themes. You are saved by themes, or I'd play this. And every aggro deck I have.
I get it in Ishin, though. Like, if you need to get... Oh, Ishin, or I guess 5 boots Felix isn't red, but something that needs to connect. Ragavan, I guess. But I'd just be scared.
You play the equipment. You play the equipment.
Phil can't even think of enough attacking like commander decks that require him to attack. Oh my god, a bunch of dirtling mid-range.
Here's the problem.
Players.
Here's the problem, Crib. It's still soft to fog. I can't block. Just fog our way out of it.
But the problem is, the thing is, then we are forcing you to fog. Right? Before you, I have a blocker, I can do this. Okay, sure.
That is true.
No, you have no blockers. You will now fog or you will take damage. And this is the slow chip damage I can get in on you as well. I can get a couple of damage in and eventually someone's going to answer the board. Or I die. And then one way or the other, time equity. I'm out.
It is a very convincing argument to ending your commander night very quickly. I will give you that, but I don't think in the way Krim wants. All right. Wait. So that's a no-go for me. Was that 3 sharks out?
I'm out.
That's 3 sharks out.
Wrong crowd. Wrong crowd.
Wrong crowd. We're all dirtily players here. We don't know what attacking is, Crib.
You don't. You don't.
All right. Round 2, sharks. Now that you have ample mana, let me show you. We did the stats episode, right? And Solemn Simulacrum was the greatest card of all time, right? Solemn, the old standboy, 4 mana 2/2, right? You ramp a land, and when it dies, you draw a card. Let me teach you about Reverse Solemn. It's called Aclazotz Deepest Betrayal. It's a 5 mana, 3 black, 4/4 legendary creature, Bat God, flying lifelink. When it attacks, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. When an opponent discards a land card, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. And then when it dies, return it tapped and transformed under its owner's control. The backside is a land that adds black. You can pay 3 mana, tap it, transform it back if a player has 1 or fewer cards in hand. It's a lot of text for a 5 mana black ramp spell. Okay, so obviously if you play a discard deck, Aclazotz is insane, right? But my proposal to you, Sharks, is you just put it in every black deck as a Solemn. So you play it. It's a 4/4 flying lifelinker. It gives you board presence. It gains you life. It might even draw you a card, right? Then you snap off the Wrath and you ramp 1 land. So Solemn ramps a land on ETB, and then dies, draw a card. This draws a card, which is a 4/4 flying lifelinker that does random crap. And then when you Wrath, you get a land. And the bonus is like super late game, you're flooded or something, you can like transform it back, right? But a 4/4 flying lifelinker that ramps into a land, you get stronger after the Wrath. You're basically Vegeta, Seth.
Vegeta.
So Vegeta, yeah. So this, I actually think this card is interesting to me. Not exactly for the reason you're saying. I have a little concern. Yes, like you can combo with a Wrath, but there's also a lot of exile removal. There's the forbidden F word that we're not allowed to say on the podcast anymore that can just exile everything. Felidar Sovereign, yes. But like, so my concern is a little bit that it can just get exiled, right? And you don't get the ramp out of it. The thing I like about this is it's a big lifelinker. And one thing I've really come to value in my commander decks is at least a card or two that gains me life. I don't want to dedicate a slot necessarily to like just gaining life, because life gains usually not good if you have to actually like dedicate an entire slot in your deck to it. But a card like this that might gain me 4, maybe it gains me 8 life before it dies, that's actually kind of appealing. Also, it is formatted for Commander where each opponent discards. You might actually draw some cards off of it. So I don't know if I'm quite as high on it as a ramp spell as you are, but I do think this card probably is better than most people give it credit for in Commander. I don't know if I'm all the way sold. I'm in the middle. I want to hear what Krim and Phil say on this one. Maybe they'll win me over.
I am on the buy train because I just think that the way that you had mentioned the formatting of it is that it is a commander card because each opponent. I just think it's a good threat. I think it's a good threat that doesn't jump off the page and won't like seem like, oh my God, this person needs to die right now, because on turn 5, yeah, I know this sounds like, wait, then why wouldn't I play the threat that does jump off the page and make people want to board wipe? Sometimes, there is, like Richard has mentioned, it's nice to not exactly have, like, spending so much mana and then having everyone's alarms going off isn't great. I think this card will creep under the radar and we'll get a few cards, and then if they answer it, who cares? It's just going to be a land. I don't look at it quite as solemn. I just think it's a solid mid-range threat. So I like it. I think it's a cool card. It's in the same like of what is it, Elder, whatever that 5-cost green creature that's a 6/6 that when it attacks you can make a beast or draw a card or gain some
Gargaroth.
Gargaroth, yeah. I look at it as that. So it's just a solid 5-drop. I don't know if it's a. You know what? I could buy. I like it. I think it's a cool card.
So in the stats episode, Richard mentioned playing OG Attack in white as a ramp spell, which I kind of liked, even though OG Attack is insane on the board if you have tokens. So if you have tokens in your deck, that's probably good if you can fit it into your budget. This is kind of like the random just value creature, unless you play discard. Is it scary? Like, will people say, "Oh, I don't want you to attack with this"?
I mean,
Then
do you like
swords
getting
it
maybe
or
discarded?
The discard's
You're
a
gonna
little
discard a
annoying.
card. Yeah.
It is a little scary. I love the lifelink, but I'm right in the middle. I think if I play a black 5-drop for value, I'd play Shieldred, the one that turns into a enchantment that rises from the Dark Realms.
Yeah,
But I really,
This one
man,
turns
if it
into a
would
land on removal.
yes, I
right?
really like
Like,
this aspect. If it was
I'm happy if I
4
play
mana,
this and just like Phyrexian Tower it, right?
I
But,
mean,
so to your point, the white one. So there's a whole cycle. There's 5 colors, right? The white one triples tokens. It's kind of scary. People will actually start
yeah.
killing you. The red one is very scary. That's the one that like pumps up burn damage. This one is not so scary. I mean, it's like kind of slow. You can even promise not to attack with it or keep it on defense. Like you can also blow up someone's thought vessel, make them discard to hand size, and then make bats off of it, right? Like there's all kinds of shenanigans you can do. It's not crazy. It's just like a good mid-range threat,
Wait,
right?
what was
as
the
opposed to
wording
solemn.
on the bets? Wait, when did you get a bet?
When an opponent discards a land card, create a 1/1
A
black
land
creature token with flying.
Because when you played, is this episode out? When this, I don't know, you at some point played or will play a commander that discarded cards. And we randomly discarded cards from like channeling and cycling.
Yeah.
So these passive
Boseiju,
yeah, this
using Boseiju would count to make a bat token.
Technuma. You're not.
Yep.
I've seen this card a lot in
on the edge of
standard.
this one.
You don't actually like
Oh,
that
yeah.
many bats. I don't think so. I don't think like the bat production is going to push it over the edge. I think where I land is I will invest in your company. I don't know if I'll invest in this card, but I think the theory. I think this theory is good. And now that I'm thinking about it, I think cards that flip into lands that aren't traditional MDFCs might be a little bit underrated. Like Treasure Map is one. Legion's Landing, the white one that makes a 1/1, and we attack with 3 or more creatures, it flips into a land. So I think I'm buying into the theory. I'm buying into the theory of this non-traditional
filed the
ramp.
patents on those yet,
But I don't
That is
know.
the
I don't.
secret to ramping. You have exposed company secrets. Your investment is worth less now.
So I buy.
But yes,
I buy the
Kanta,
theory.
Dowsing Device. Right?
I
There's
buy-
all these things that flip into lands. Aclazotz is a very strong one. Like usually you're like, well, I have to synergize with something, right? Like Primal Amulet, right? You need to cast instant and sorceries. As Kanta, right? You need to fill your graveyard, stuff like that. Aclazotz just fits anywhere. You don't need to discard anything. It's just a 4/4 flying lifelinker that goes down, which is why I chose it. But
All
yes, our company secret is things that randomly ramp into land, Seth, and you
All right,
expose it. Get to the patent office.
I'm in. I'm
Get to
in.
the
Then
patent
I'm in.
office.
If that's what the company's about, I'm in. I can overlook Aclazotz itself and and focus on the rest of the cards.
I think Aclazotz is not getting enough love here. I think this card is probably better than you're giving it credit. My opinion, just personally. I think
I
this
will
card's
take that.
actually a sell.
I think it's fine. It's good.
I think I do the company thing. I can't invest in this card, but if it was like 3-4 mana-ish and did something unrelated to attacking, you would. I'm so intrigued by the.
There's
flipping
Dowsing
into land.
Device, Dowsing Dagger.
Oh,
which
this
also
one.
you
Whew.
search for as Kanta,
Yeah.
Treasure Map.
Yeah, I mean, these cards are great.
Wishing
I'm
Well
just
or
looking-
something, where you mill and descend or craft.
Oh, yeah, Yeah, I play the.
There's a whole
the
bunch of
Everflowing
these.
Well. Yeah,
Everflowing
and
Well.
Brass's
Yeah.
Tunnel Grinder. I'm a big fan of
Yes.
those two, by the way. But I
Yes.
play Mishra, so. Yeah, but the bet itself, it's one mana too much, a little too attack heavy, I guess.
To attack.
Okay, here's
What
the
if there's a
caveat.
Bedlam on
You can
the
say-
side?
really
when
don't
you
attack.
You can say, "I'm Batman" every time you play this. Okay, that's what you do. And then Seth will be like, "Is that an X-Men?"
Yeah.
All right, Seth.
All right.
Sell us on the next X-Man that we should be playing.
I'm gonna sell you on an X-Man. I'm gonna sell you on another constructed staple that no one plays in Commander. Just like Aclazotz sees a ton of standard play, but no one thinks about it in Commander. I want to sell you on Fable the Mirror Breaker. So I know you know Fable the Mirror Breaker. It was banned in Standard. It's good in Modern and Legacy. It sees play in 2% of decks according to EDH Rec. No one plays the card. So if you don't know Fable the Mirror Breaker, it does kind of everything. It's a saga. Its first lore counter makes a 2/2 red goblin shaman creature token that when it attacks you get a treasure. Second lore counter, you get to discard up to 2 cards, draw 2 cards. Third one flips it around into Reflections of Kiki-Jiki, which is a creature that's a 2/2 that you can pay 1 and tap it and make a copy of target non-legendary creature you control. Only get to keep it until end of turn. So kind of like a mini Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker. So I think one of the weird aspects of Commander is that when a card's really good in 60 card formats, people think of it as a 60 card and don't really consider it for Commander. And I think Fable's one of these cards because it's been so good in 60 card formats that people just think of it as a standard card or a modern card and not a Commander card. But I'm here to sell you on it, not just being a good Commander card, like for a specific deck, but I think this is, much like Aclazotz, a card that you could play in any black deck. I think Fable's a card that you can play in any red deck and it's going to be worth it because it does the 2 most important things in all of Commander. When you think about it, what are the 2 most important things? Mana advantage and card advantage. The goblin that it makes a treasure whenever it attacks. So it's giving you this mana advantage, and it's mana advantage that's kind of nice because it sticks around even if the creature dies. Once you get in that attack, you still got the treasure. And then its second lore counter, letting you rummage away a couple of useless lands or even just filling your graveyard, maybe isn't technically card advantage because you discard and then draw, but still, if you're turning useless lands into real cards or have graveyard synergies, which many decks do these days, you're actually kind of generating card advantage with it. And then the backside is super powerful. You can't really play Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker in Commander unless you're trying to like Tomer and combo with it because everyone knows it's a combo card, and as soon as it hits the battlefield, they're going to kill it or they're going to kill you because they're going to expect, the combo kill that ends the game. But you can't really combo with Reflections a Kiki Jiki. It's worded in a way that prevents that. So it's more of just a value play, but the value's really high. Imagine 1 mana copy my Muldrifter or my Solemn Simulacrum. You get another land, it's going to sacrifice itself, it dies, you're going to draw a card from it, or a Dockside Extortionist, or a Sun Titan free animation, an Avenger of Zendikar for a ton of plants. So almost any deck that's playing a bunch of creatures can get value out of the backside. So I think it's worth playing. Plus, it gives you 2 bodies. Maybe you're trying to like flip a Dowsing Dagger and your goblin gets killed. Well, another turn or 2 from now, you're going to get that backside, another chance to throw your Dowsing Dagger on there and flip it. So I think that Fable the Mirrorbreaker is just like a really good commander card that you can play in any deck for value. I know it's not flashy. It's not going to draw you, 20 cards at once or whatever, but it just does so many little things and offers so much value that as a rampant card advantage engine, I think you should play it in pretty much any deck, or can play it in pretty much any deck.
This card has been banned in Standard.
Yes.
This card has definitely propelled like red-black mid-range to the top of every meta when it came out. This card is the truth. This card is 100% the truth. That token is so good because it's so inoffensive. And it's just not good enough to where, I'm going to fire off my board wipe. No. So the problem is, if if they have a bunch of bigger blockers, then it's a one-off. But even just a one-off get a treasure is still fine with me. And if I get more than one attack with this token in, I'm flying up on the resources. And then I'm getting card filtering by drawing 2. And then, like you had mentioned, last mode is Kiki Jiki. It's always nice to do a board wipe right before it flips so that the next turn you do get a Kiki Jiki and then you get your better bomb that you can clone and do stuff with. So I think this card just does very good things at each chapter. And just like it was in Standard and just like it was in every other format that it was played in, I think it still carries over to Commander.
You love copying stuff, Phil. You love copying stuff. You gotta be on board, right? It copies. Think of all the things you can copy.
How I know. So funnily enough, Fable of the Mirrorbreaker is on my list of Shark Tankable cards as well.
Ooh.
I did put it into my Omnath deck way back in the day just because I opened one and I thought, I can play it in any deck because it's good. And as you would expect, it does the thing. Especially the backside is crazy. You can copy like a Wood Elves or an Avenger of Zendikar. I did eventually cut it because it's not related to landfall or something. It is
for flavor purposes.
Yeah. It's kind of, unless you play I guess, treasure or token deck, it's hard to justify it on flavor or theme. But man, does it do all the stuff you want to do. I guess the looting mode isn't, I guess, no, it's also good if you want to reanimate it. It fits so many decks. You got my money. It is a little pricey because it's still very heavily played where it's legal.
Like Modern
But
Play or whatever.
if you have one,
Aclazotz was like $25. So
I would say flavor-wise, it's even a little more flexible than that because it also makes a goblin, so you can justify playing it in goblins, saga decks, enchantment decks. So there's other ways that you can justify it. But all right, Richard, you're always the hard one. You're always a tough sell. Fable, you like little value-y things. It blocks early in the game.
For you, Seth.
Yes.
Before we open up the wallet here, what do you consider it as in your deck? Are you cutting a ramp spell? Are you cutting a card draw spell? Or are you cutting a value spell, like a cloning spell, like a cursed mirror or something like that? Like, where does this go? Because I see it as a jack of all trades, master of none.
Yep,
therefore, it just never makes my deck. Right? Like, I'll just do the thing my deck needs more. So if I need more ramp, I get the stronger ramp card. If I need more card draw, I get the stronger card draw. So where do you put this, Seth?
That's a good question. Because you are right. It doesn't do anything specifically well. I think cutting a ramp spell for it, if you're playing land-based ramp, is a little sketchy. I would cut a mana rock for it if you're a mana rock believer. I think this is equally good at ramping as a mana rock, but if you're ramping a land into play, it's probably not as good. I wouldn't cut a burst card draw effect for it. I guess it just has to fall in that value slot. So I think you're I'm doing a horrible job selling you on my product here because I'm agreeing with you. But I think technically you are correct that it is a tricky card to slot into a deck because it doesn't have that one clear goal. But I think that's part of why it's underrated. It's kind of like a charm. It just does so many little things well that it tends to get overlooked. But when you actually play with it, you're like, oh my God, this like 3-drop is kind of putting me super far ahead. So I guess it's got to be like a Cursed Mirror type slot is the easiest way to justify it.
I think when you look at a saga, you aren't looking at it in that lens. I think you need to look at it like is a planeswalker that can't be attacked, and that is guaranteed to get 3 activations.
I don't know about Garrett. So here's the biggest problem for me. It's a tempo card, right? Because it's so slow.
Capital T.
Because you need to play it, and it has to live 3 turns before it does the payoff thing. Right? You need to actually play it on turn 3, such that by turn 6, you have this if this somehow miraculously survived a board wipe. And that means you got to deploy this on turn 3 rather than ramping or drawing cards or something. And then it has to survive
on
like
turn
3-4 turns.
So I
That's
think
a little scary. Like you have to survive board wipes on multiple turns to get like max value.
So I will, yes, to get max value you do, but if the backside didn't exist, the card would still be fine. Like even if it was make the 2/2 goblin that makes a treasure and like rummage twice, like it's even if you don't get to that payoff, it's still very good. Like you still get the ramp effect, you still get the filtering effect, you still fill your graveyard, you find what you need. So I think if you're focused,
Ragavan in a random deck for like treasure creation, no, you don't do that, right?
Well, I kind of hate Ragavan,
I think a big appeal
but you
is
could.
the backside.
Then you have to invest in Crim. You have to do the double investment here and get Bedlam on the table so that this treasure.
Oh man, then you're gonna treasure every turn,
not dying. What if you just play Curse of Opulence and called it a day, right?
The backside's so fun though if you do get to it. It just does such fun things. Think of copying that Solemn, Richard. Think of copying that Solemn. The value.
Okay, I'll buy a 5% stake in the Saffron Olive.
Okay,
here, because this sounds suspicious, but there's enough good points here that it's worth a shot. It's worth a shot to see where it goes. You got to put some money in the wild. This is like buying a lottery ticket. You don't expect to win, but it sounds.
But you never know.
It sounds plausible.
I'll take it.
All right, Phil, hit us with a card.
Okay, so one card that has turned out in my playtesting to be more useful than I expected is technically called Virtue of Knowledge, which is kind of just a Panharmonicon for every type of permanent. But the card that has been more impressive than expected is its adventure, and that's Vantress Visions. So I'm kind of like, I'm not going to go on here and pitch a Panharmonicon. Everybody knows that these effects are crazy whenever your deck makes them crazy. But I've put this in my Lonis and my Mishra deck. Both can make use of a Panharmonicon. But randomly, both can make a lot of use of the ability, and I'm going to read it now before I keep talking. 2 mana, instant. Copy target activated or triggered ability you control. You may choose new targets for that copy. So, turns out the flaw is you don't have any ability to copy, but the most of the time, or like the easiest thing to use it's just a fetch land. You can just copy the fetch ability and instantly speed like fetch, I guess, to get another land. But in my playtesting, I have made such cool plays with this. So my Lonis deck often ends up with infinite treasures, and then you tap Lonis and check somebody's deck for any permanent and put it onto the battlefield pretty much. And with this, I did it twice. And you might call this win more, but I'm not complaining. Also, it copies Agent of Treachery effects, then Mishra's ability where you copy something, Portal of Phyrexia's abilities, whatever you want, either the Reanimate or the Sacrifice effect. And the coolest one I did in my Mishra deck was I have Dragonspark Reactor as a win con, where with every artifact it stacks counters, and then you crack it and shoot that much damage. And with this, you shoot 2 players to death with this. It's almost the entire table already. So, yeah, the 5 mana Virtue of Knowledge is a Panharmonicon. Don't use this with your bounce lands. It's not good with bounce lands, just a heads up. But otherwise, it's, of course, very good. The cool part is just how versatile this triggered or copy or activated ability copying turned out. And I checked for other cards because it felt a little weird to pitch this card just because of the adventure, but it is not too easy to copy a triggered or activated ability just on the stack. It's usually like on tap abilities on commanders and stuff. So this one is the one I play, and my god, the plays I've made with it were way better than I expected when I just put a Panharmonicon into my deck.
You caught me on the right day, Phil. I was playing Standard a couple days ago, and I lost to someone who was playing a standard Jace the Perfected Mind that has like the -5 ultimate mill 15, but they were like a combo deck with this where they like Jaced and then copied it and just build my entire deck. Well, that happened on stream, so that made me realize the power of that mode of the card. I think copying a fetch land is nice. I don't know how consistent it would be. That would be my concern. Like, you got to have a fetch land. We'd have to math it out and see, like, how many fetches do you need to make it work? But when it comes down to it, it's a Panharmonicon. Like, even I know you're selling the other side of the card, but how are you going to get me to not say yes to a Panharmonicon effect? Like, I would be disowned if I said no to this card. So I'm in for the Panharmonicon effect, but I do think the other side is actually sneaky powerful too.
I am kind of low on this card because I was high on it in the beginning. And I just don't really find myself ever using it enough, right? Like, I have to leave up exactly the correct amount of mana to like play the instant side to get the value off that. And because of that, I'm always like, do I want to put this on an adventure yet? No, I want to wait for the better trigger. I don't want to just play the enchantment because then I don't feel like I got my value off the instant spell. So I don't know. I mean, it's always great in theory. And then it feels like the 101st card for me. Like the 103rd card. I always end up cutting it. I just don't feel like it does quite enough yet. It just kind of... I think that I want more out of the instant side, and I feel like I want more out of the enchantment as well. Maybe I'm just not putting in the decks, or I don't play the decks that can take advantage of this enough. Because instead of playing like... I would just play like a bribery or something if I wanted to steal Agent of Treachery and I get to look through your deck, right? I don't know. I feel like there's just so many things that I want to do. Like the decks that I want to put this in are like Agent of Treachery, as you had mentioned, or something that relies on me hitting or triggering and then milling, like Jace or something like that. But then I just play another mill spell instead. I just play another, like, whatever effect I'm trying to get and copy, I just play that card. So it's a pass.
I'm a buy. I've toyed with this card, and like Krim, it's always like on the edge of the cutting block, and I use it only as a 2-mana copy of fetch land. Okay, like that is the primary goal, and I slot it in the ramp slot. And hypergeometric calculator. If you have 5 fetches, in your first, it should be 10 cards. In your first 10 cards, which would be turn 3, which is when you need to use this, 42% chance of having that fetch there. The biggest problem for me is I've been cutting fetches out of my deck in an attempt to like slot basics and MDFCs and stuff into my deck. I've been cutting the fetches as well, so that's the big problem. But I really like the idea of 2-mana rampant growth in blue. And then depending on your command, like it'll differ depending on your deck. Like if your deck actually has a lot of triggers to copy, then this makes sense. But if your deck doesn't have a lot of triggers, the fetch lands may be enough. Like I'm sure you can get value somewhere out of it. Like there's gonna be some trigger somewhere. And then Panharmonicon side, very good. Works with fill specials like Fairy Artisan. You get 1 token, but you get double the ETBs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Spirited Companion, if you're playing that, like stuff like that always works, right? So I like this card. I'll invest in this.
It's sad that there's no 1 mana, just the Vantress Vision, because this would be more interesting to pitch. But then I wouldn't know because I wouldn't play it, because I just played for the Panharmonicon side mainly. But notice that Vantress Visions does crazy stuff and sometimes randomly wins the game.
All right. Krim, last time you didn't get the Sharks. I hope you brought one for their metagame here. Bring it home with your last pitch here.
Well, my last pitch will be easy because I now know that I cannot pitch aggro to dirtling play. So how about I help you dirtle? All right.
Yeah, let's
This
dirtle.
one, like a recent one that came out, also in standard. And it's a standard where Cavern of Souls is just so prominent, right? So things are usually uncounterable. And that is why I love 3 Steps Ahead. Because now, okay, let's read this. It's 1 mana, but it's got Spree, plus, 1 in a blue, counter target spell, plus 3 generic, create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control, or plus 2, draw 2, then discard a card. So you can add and staple however many of these modes you want, but at its floor, it can be a counterspell, which is always great. I've now noticed this in any blue deck that I play. This is just up there now. It's such a powerful modal spell. You may be thinking, okay, it has similarities between Cryptic Command, but I think the one thing here is this middle mode, which is create a token that's a copy of target artifact or creature you control. This allows you to potentially counter a spell in the late game while also cloning and getting a free copy of whatever you have. And if you need, then you can counter and also, for 5 mana, you can counter, draw 2, then discard a card. So you're able to filter your draws. I just think this is now I'm starting to think this is like a staple counter spell in any kind of deck because let's say things are uncounterable, then great. You can use this for something else. You can also use this as just a 4 mana get a clone. It's a modal spell that is actually solid for whatever rate it is. If you want to just, okay, maybe not the 3 mana draw 2 discard a card at instant speed, but at least you can pay 4 mana for an instant speed clone of any artifact or creature you control. So I think that middle mode is what makes it quite nice because then you get to really either multiply in problematic permanents you control and at the very least protect yourself.
This card's so good. I'm very, very on board with this. But I think of it, honestly, I think of it as a cloning effect with the upside of being a counter. The counter spell is the most, I guess, commonly used mode. But I think the most value you get out of this, especially in Commander, is for 4 mana being able to copy any artifact or creature you control instant speed is so incredibly strong. Copying your Agent of Treachery or the Portal to Phyrexia or your Solemn Simulacrum. And you can often do this while you're also like looting through your deck or countering something. So I'm very in on this card. There's so much flexibility. Yes, it's not efficient at any point on the curve, but it doesn't matter because it's just so powerful once you start stacking up the mode. So you got me sold on this one for sure, Krim.
Yeah,
It helps
same
you
here.
dirtle.
I mean, it draws cards, it creates tokens. I guess it counters something as well. Fun fact, Krim has been vocal about this card since the very beginning of the set. But sadly, I didn't listen too early because then I don't know, he referenced it in a podcast and then I thought, well, actually, this should probably go into one of my decks. And then it was already at $10 for the extended foil. And then I thought, I'm not going to pay that for a counter. Also, yes, Spree is not too cool with Discovery or what's the other one? Cascading effects. So this kind of
although
kind of sad, but it is pretty cool. I play the 6 mana one that does pretty much what's the 6 mana counter and copy stuff as well. I like this. Yes, I like this. I like counter spells in Cascade decks that do something else in case the counter doesn't work. This one, weird wording for this, but man, it is a cool card. I gotta say.
Can you not pay for this if you cascade into it or no?
You could pay for
You'd
it.
You'd have to pay the mana though, yeah.
Master 1 is 8 mana. You gotta get just a lot of mana if you also pay for Spree. But yeah, I'm totally in on this card though.
I don't like this card. I used to play like way back in the day, like maybe 5 years ago, Mystic Confluence. And it's like a 5 mana spell. I don't even know what it does anymore, but it has like multiple stacking effects where you can try to counter something or draw cards. The problem is it's so inefficient. And you're like 3 mana for the counter spell. That's a cancel, but no one plays cancel. We play like 0 mana counter spells, right? That's like 3 more mana, right? We play Fierce. I play Pact of Negation. You can play Force of Will. Like there's all kinds of things you can play. And the big problem here is like if you're after cloning effects, I think it's better to pay 1 more mana and have the flexibility of cloning anything on the table. Right, so a normal clone is 4 mana, which is like copy anything, and then like Phyrexian Metamorph is 3 mana, copy anything. But then 3 mana is the rate for copying your own stuff. But just for 1 more mana, you can copy something with someone else to catch up, right? Like someone plays a Consecrated Sphinx, you have a Consecrated Sphinx. So I don't know.
This is the
3 mana,
instant, though.
draw 2, discard 1 is like so sad, right? So I don't know. I don't like these modes. Like the question I have for you, Krim, is where do you put it as? Do you put it as a counter spell? Do you put it as a card draw, a clone?
I
normally
look
play
at this as a
clones?
counter spell because I play so many that I can take one
Yeah,
out.
you play so many.
But
But what if I
also-
only play like 1 or 2? What do am I really cutting one of them for this?
So like I would look at this as counterspell 3, right? You have like mana drain, and then you have arcane denial or counterspell, one of those two. And then I would personally, if it were my priority order, I would go mana drain, arcane denial, and then this. So if a deck like I also could see this going up above arcane denial because again, I have found that the cloning ability has been very good. And then this is a solid late game counterspell. Like this is a very good late game counterspell.
So Arcane Denial is 2 mana, counter spell,
Sure.
draw a card. Your opponent will draw as well, right? That's 2 mana. The equivalent here would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana, counter target spell, draw 2, discard 1.
Sure.
Like that's a
I mean-
huge gap for the flexibility to make a
This is,
token,
but
right?
that is only a counterspell, right? So this is like a
Yes.
counterspell with more modes and things attached to it that are very relevant throughout a game of Commander. So I look at it more like if you wanted to, I would pay 6 mana to counter a spell and clone anything. Or again, I can just instant speed clone. This is just a very versatile card and has proven to be absurdly powerful. It reads not fancy, but it plays so well with any game plan that you have in blue.
I like it.
what does C double do?
Yep.
C copy
C
target
C
spell.
double I
create-
also like.
So there's
also
a bunch of these like mid-rangey blue things that like generate a ton of value. So we talked about Sublime Epiphany. C double is another one that doesn't counter anything though, right? That just copies
Yes.
a spell and like a creature, right?
If your opponent has 8 cards. So there's a lot of moving parts there.
Yeah.
This is just always going to do whatever you want as long as you have the mana for it.
Okay. If I had a subsidiary that ran 8 counter spells, then I would invest. Right? Like if you believe in running ample counter spells, I feel this is like a good hedge, right? Like,
Yeah.
like I don't need the 6th counter spell, but this can clone and this can draw a card. So it's a good hedge. But if you are a 1 to 2 counter spell believer, like this can't make the cut, right? Like you're
Well,
cutting things.
then it's a clone spell.
It's a clone spell then.
But then I would just play like a better clone spell, right?
But you can't
Instant
instant speed.
Being
Yeah.
instant is nice. Like being instant is a pretty realistic upside compared to a metamorph or
That's
something.
true.
Although it doesn't hit your opponent's
true.
stuff, so it is a drawback. But you can get some blowouts, instant speed copying stuff.
I mean, shouldn't that not matter
is
to
true.
Richard? Richard believes that his deck should be better than what his opponents are doing, right? When it comes to copying stuff. So, if Richard, you're going to be playing this. Why do you care if you clone your opponent's stuff? Usually,
Because the biggest problem is I don't like conditional cards, right? So a counter spell is a conditional card in that you need to have the mana available and then your opponent has to play something. Cloning your own things is also conditional, right? If someone wraths the board and you rip this, you're like, wow, there's nothing to clone here, right? Like there's nothing
when you
useful
say
to do.
wrath, you mean like a full wrath or like creature wrath? Because the
Yeah,
nice
like
thing
you're,
is
you're
you can,
behind. Like either you got wrath or you
could
didn't
clone
draw
your
your right
Skyclave
pieces or
Relic.
whatever.
that we both. I know you and I love that card. You can
Yeah,
clone that.
that is kind of sad though, right? Like,
Is it?
If you needed
Is
to
it,
kick
though?
a Skyclave Relic and then copy it with this thing, like is that really where your game wanted to go?
Probably not, but you can, right? The thing is, you can clone artifacts out the wazoo here. So, like, if you're an artifact deck, this is also good. Like, there's a lot here. Cloning anything that is either a creature or artifact, I think, has been very relevant. It doesn't read fancy, but Richard, I promise you, if you play this card, you will understand.
Imagine double Surveyor
I can
scope,
see the
Richard.
potential.
2 Surveyor scopes. So
That's
many
impossible,
lands.
unless you,
You just
then
skip
you have to
your land
actually
drop
own
for the
your
first
Lotus
6
Fields as
turns
well.
or something. Yeah.
I don't know how you're casting it, but yeah, if you skip your first 6 drops,
All right, I'm feeling frisky today. We'll put a 5% on Crim. You know, we gotta spread out the lottos, right? You buy a little scratcher over here, you buy a little Powerball over here. Spree is very versatile, right? We like charms, we like these like modal things, and this one can never be bad, right? Like you can always like get something out of it. So I could see trying it, but I'm so scared of playing like too many conditional spells because the thing I hate most is having 8 cards in hand and like passing the turn because I can't actually do anything because they're all conditional spells.
hold on.
Right?
You have 8 cards in hand, and one of them is a counter spell. I'm feeling safe.
But you have no board. You're just gonna pass and counter, right? You didn't really progress anything, right?
Worst case scenario, sure, but like worst case scenario, like I the floor is that I still have a counter spell or a draw 2 if I really need it. Card filtering is nice.
All right. So, sharks. Have we used up all our money? I don't know how much we invested. We didn't even specify the amount.
Oh, I didn't know I had an amount.
Yeah. Yeah. The budget's all
But
spent.
it's just make believe money. It's okay. We can invest whatever we want.
I'm broke. I bought all the things except for maybe the virtue. That was it. I bought everything.
I hope we're all right. Otherwise, MTG Goldfish going bankrupt in 2 weeks. We'll let you know. Check the comments, see if our investment paid off. This is not financial advice. Do not copy us. Yeah, let us know what you thought about these cards. Anything stick out? You can pull the Saffron Olive, where it's like I don't like your card, but I like the theory behind it, and I choose these cards instead. That's like going to companies saying, I don't like you guys, but your idea is good. I'm gonna go invest in these other guys over here.
Yeah.
But yeah, let us know, and then let us know if we missed anything. Maybe our ideas were on the right track. Maybe you got a better one. Maybe you have a better Surveyor scope, or you have a better Virtue of Knowledge. I'm surprised there's no copying a trigger. There's like Rings of Brighthearth, but that's one of them, either activated or non-activated. So I'm surprised. So maybe someone can dredge up something that does what we want. And then let us know in the comments, and then we'll see you all back here next week.